GAR-23.
Can clean needles save lives? Can the spread of AIDS among addicts be stopped? Could this anti-AIDS activist wind up in jail? Will the courts make legal what the legislature won't? Needle exchange, it's what's on the docket for this edition of Due Process.
Major funding for Due Process is made possible by the New Jersey State Bar Foundation, committed to educating the public about the law. Additional funding is provided by Lawyer's Diary and Manual, publishers of print and electronic information for and about the legal community, including the legislative manual.
IV drug use and AIDS, they are inextricably linked, especially in New Jersey, where the proportion of injection-related cases is the highest in the country. So is it any wonder that the needle exchange war continues to rage? I'm Raymond Brown, and on our docket today, the debate over the distribution of clean needles. We'll hear from the committed on all sides of the question, but first, here's Sandra King with the story of a court case that goes right to the point.
Raymond, it's a case that began 1 year ago this week when New Brunswick's outlaw needle exchange program finally ran afoul of law enforcers who had chosen to ignore them for the previous 2 years. And the charges still hang heavy over 2 clean needle activists who could face up to 6 months in jail. But their supporters say that's nothing compared to the consequences faced by IV drug users who can't get clean needles.
Like if this program was out there, when I was out there with needles and using needles, I might not have contracted the virus.
We first met Susan Johnson in 1993. She was living then at Integrity House, a drug rehab program where she'd hoped to find a new start. But like so many intravenous drug users, she had brought something into rehab with her, the HIV infection. An infection passed to her in a shared syringe. An infection she thought that she could have avoided if she'd had clean needles.
I know that if it might have been in my life at that time, it might have changed my life.
But needle exchange had not been an option. And in the years since we talked to Susan Johnson, her HIV turned to full-blown AIDS. Last year, it killed her.
Are you afraid of going to jail for this? No, I don't think they'll put me in jail.
But Diana McCaig knows she could go to jail for distributing clean needles. There are charges pending against her already, the result of a bust here in New Brunswick last year. But she goes on, she says, in the hope of saving lives, of saving other addicts from the fate of Susan Johnson.
What'd you give me?
7.
7?
And McCaig and her partners in the group that they call High, the Hebrew word for life, continue to court danger from police who watch them still, as both sides wait to see if their charges in the end hold up.
How many you have today?
9.
9? Okay, why don't you drop them in there? What's your code?
What we're doing is not anything that's intending to break any laws or to hurt anybody, and because of that, we'll get off on something.
But their case so far has not been successful. On April 1st, a trial court judge turned down their motion to dismiss and their argument that goes like this.
The purpose of the statute was to stop commercial drug distribution, to stop the glamorization of drug use, and that's why the paraphernalia statute was enacted. This does not lead to increased drug use, it does not lead to new drug users, and that's the heart of it, that this is a public health measure.
And attorneys Alan Silber and Wanda Aiken, who've been fighting this case pro bono, now hope they'll get some satisfaction from an appellate court, or if that fails, from the state Supreme Court.
The studies have clearly shown the existence of needle exchange programs does not start new users. It doesn't encourage or enhance use. It's purely a life-saving measure. Getting back to your first question, that's why it was such an easy decision to get involved.
If this program didn't exist, would you share a needle?
Probably. It's sad, but probably.
There are hundreds and probably thousands of people involved in this movement throughout this country. And it's not just about giving people clean syringes. It's about keeping people as healthy and safe as possible.
Programs like Prevention Point in San Francisco that's claimed it's been saving lives for years without official interference.
Needle exchange. Stop AIDS.
I see it as not writing off people because they're using drugs.
And the New Brunswick project had been left alone, too, for nearly 2 years, until last spring, just after the governor's own advisory committee on AIDS gave its nod to needle exchange, despite Christy Whitman's long-time opposition.
The opposition certainly is political. I think it's easy to make political statements when the people that it affects aren't the people who are going to be coming out to the polls to cast their vote on one side or another.
And the prosecutor was pretty clear that we weren't arrested because we were breaking the law necessarily. He said very clearly that they decided to arrest us because we were being too blatant about what we were doing.
Alcohol?
Okay, you're using this every time, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's important to keep your skin clean.
Yes.
Okay, why don't you take an orange?
Okay, you're right.
You need some cotton pellets?
How about your HIV status?
Right now I'm negative. I was just tested about 6 months ago.
I'm always scared of catching AIDS.
And with good reason. More than half of the more than 17,000 AIDS cases so far in New Jersey have been contracted by either those who used shared needles or had sex with those who did.
Where you been at?
Oh, you know, I've been busy. I haven't been able to get out here.
I know the narcotics squad is watching them every day. They know they back out here. They don't want to do nothing because they know they're doing the right thing.
But the legislature hasn't been convinced of that. A bill's been stuck in committee for nearly 4 years.
What the taxpayers and voters in my district are saying to me and to others who represent them is that we need to remove the drugs from the streets and the drug dealers from the street corners.
The public hysteria over violence, over drug use, and particularly drug use amongst children, calls for knee-jerk reactions. It's nothing that's well thought out.
They're always afraid that what happens, you know, if this program does no longer exist, then what am I going to do? I don't know what I'd do without these people being here.
Why don't you take an orange, too?
Yeah, I might as well eat it on the way home.
Okay. Y'all set?
If I get that far. Y'all coming back Monday?
Yeah, I'll probably be here.
All right, I'll see you then.
Take it easy.
So while they wait to see if the charges will stand or whether an appellate court in the end will see it their way, the activists of the High Project continue to risk still another arrest and more prosecution. But New Brunswick police, it seems, are waiting too. They've made no move to interfere despite the open needle distribution. But if a nod to needle exchange fails to come in the courts here in New Jersey, it may not come at all. The bill that would make it legal has been stalled in the state Senate for years, and Raymond, even its sponsor, says that she holds little hope at the moment for passage.
And when we come back, we'll hear from that senator. She's still convinced that needle exchange saves lives. We'll get the arguments on the other side from a member of the Governor's Advisory Council on AIDS. And we'll get still another point of view from a rehab expert who wrestles daily with the horrors of AIDS and addiction. So stay with us.
I think giving clean needles to drug users really only kind of promotes the problem.
I don't want to condone drug use, but I think it's better than letting people go around using dirty needles.
I don't think the needle exchange program is the way to go.
I mean, it sounds like a good idea to me if it keeps people from getting AIDS.
It's just going to encourage them to use more drugs.
Nobody should be using that sort of thing.
Those people will use drugs no matter what, and it will keep them healthier in the long run.
I know it might help in AIDS, with the AIDS epidemic, but maybe there's a better way even at that.
It's too dangerous. Isn't it too dangerous?
Well, the answer to that depends on whom you ask. Winona Littman, who sponsored the needle exchange bill in the state Senate, has one response. It's diametrically opposed to that of Reverend Michael P. Orsi of the Camden Diocese, who registered his dissent when the Governor's Advisory Council on AIDS gave its nod to clean needles. And you'd get yet a third response from drug rehab expert David Kerr. Now, I should tell you that I'm closely connected to two of the lawyers you saw representing the High Project. I haven't worked on that project, but I've worked with them on other projects and other policy matters. And so, given the fact that I'm connected to one side of the dispute, I thought I'd turn to you, Father Orsi, and ask you why, when it seems intuitive that giving needles would minimize the spread of AIDS and therefore be a good thing, why you oppose it.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, first of all, and I'm happy to be with Senator Lippman, too. We're friends, and we both are here for a good cause. We just want to find the best way to end this horrible disease of AIDS. I have a number of reasons why I'm opposed to needle exchange. The first one is an ethical reason. We have to talk about ethics, since our society is having a real problem with ethics these days, and sometimes within the highest positions in our country, there are questions regarding ethics. Can we ever do a wrong thing even for a good purpose? Even if we can get a good effect, is it ever right to do that? And our Judeo-Christian background, our moral philosophy, our ethics tells us it's never proper to do a wrong thing even for a right reason. It will eventually catch us in the end. The second reason is much more scientific. The data that has come back to us from these exchange programs throughout the country and even abroad is either incomplete or it's flawed. Even the NIH study, two of the doctors, Drs. Brown and Kleber, who were part of the study, said that in no way does the data tell us that needle exchange curtails the spread of the AIDS virus.
Senator Lippman, let me just interrupt you for a second, Father. Father Orsi made reference to an NIH study.
Right.
Is that study related all to your reasons for sponsoring this bill?
Yes, I came to these two bills because I went to an AIDS summit the year before I was appointed to the Governor's Council. And at that summit was Dr. Bruce Siegel, who was commissioner then of the Health Department. And I was convinced by their figures and their proof that giving clean needles did not increase drug use. At least those are all the reports that I have seen up to this point.
Why are you having problems with that bill? Why isn't there a rosy prospect for that bill?
Because there are two schools of thought in this state. One is that it's a moral issue, that you don't give clean needles to increase drug use. It's been proved that it doesn't increase drug use. That is the reason that I'm for it. Then there's the other side to decrease the spread of AIDS. Well, it's been proved in all the places where there are needle exchange programs and over-the-counter sale of needles that the spread of AIDS has been curtailed and the number of cases has dropped. That is my main reason for having these bills. It's strictly a public health issue.
Now, we've got Senator Lippman saying there are clearly two schools of thought. David Kerr, does that mean you'll come down on one side or the other?
I really am fluctuating. I think one of the big problems that I have right now with needle exchange is that, for example, in the state of New York, treatment is available to people who want help. In the state of New Jersey, it's absolutely unavailable, particularly for residential treatment. For example, Integrity gets 70 calls a day for treatment, for residential treatment, and we can only accept 10 to 15 people a week. The problem is that needle exchange, good needle exchange programs should lead people into treatment and the treatment that they need to help themselves. In New Jersey, we don't really have the network available.
But even with inadequate treatment, on a day-to-day basis, don't you have to think about the question of whether the people you're treating are going to be more likely to die or not, and whether needle exchange helps retard the spread of AIDS or something that might cause it to spread more rapidly?
And also they are spreading AIDS to their loved ones and to the children that follow.
Let me just jump in on this. There's a real problem because in order for us to track whether or not there's reduction in AIDS, we have to have a reliable population that we can draw the information from. Addicts are not a reliable population. We also don't know about their sexual practices. What we do know, however, though, is in a study, for instance, in Montreal, the rate of AIDS in the population increased during a needle exchange program. The seroprevalence rate increased 0.5%, which is a significant rise in that population.
Hold on a second. Can I interrupt you for ask you one question? I'm intrigued by the fact that your premise, or one of your premises, is really an ethical, a moral, a philosophical premise.
Exactly.
Does that mean that no matter what the studies show, you would have to oppose needles, or is there some point at which your ethical position would be affected by what the results of the studies are?
If we are dealing with something that is wrong, I could see no way that it could benefit society in the long run.
So even if the studies were undisputed?
Yeah, oftentimes, but they are terribly disputed. Colorado just voted it down, needle exchange, because the studies are disputed. Willimantic, Connecticut, just recently ended their needle exchange program because people were ODing by the riverfront and children were finding needles in the playgrounds.
If the studies are so disputed, Senator Lippman, why then are you such a strong supporter of needle exchange?
Because we had a hearing on it in the Senate, and it just happened that the experts on needle exchange and the disease and the research and all that were in Princeton having a meeting. They came over to the Senate. They testified to the senators about the lack. Connecticut had only had it for 1 year. They hadn't had all these cases of people ODing because they got clean needles. As a matter of fact, they had a decrease of 40% in the spread of AIDS. And the people in research in New York City found out that there was no increase in New York for the number of AIDS patients. I mean, for the number of drug users. That means that they would have to come to drugs by way of the clean needles.
But once again, it's too difficult to track. What we have to be concerned about are the long-run implications. What are the implications? What message does it send to children? What's it say about the use of drugs? We have children now at an all-time high in our country using drugs. Senator Martinez, I beg your pardon, Governor Martinez of Florida, later on drug czar, said there's no doubt that needle exchange increases the use of drugs in the inner cities. And that's where the real danger is. The danger is not in Princeton. The danger is not going to be in Haddonfield, or it's not going to be in Chester, New Jersey. The danger is going to be in the inner cities. And this has a terrible impact upon minority populations. It reeks to them of Tuskegee. Just April 13th.
Dave, you're in the inner city. In our report earlier, which Sandy King showed us, there was a woman named Susan Johnson who had been in your program, who's now dead, who says she got the virus through the use of needles. She thinks she might be alive today had she had clean needles. Do you think that's true or not?
I think that's probably true if what she said was true, and I believe that there is a point where we should consider needle exchange. I'm not as violently opposed to it, certainly not the Hyde experiment. I think they should keep looking the other way with that. But let me talk about life and death issues now. Things have changed since the advent of the protease inhibitors. And just taking our residents at Integrity, used to be when I looked at the people with AIDS and HIV like Susan Johnson, I would have to say that in 2 or 3 years they're going to be gone. And then I have to worry about their family. But now is a different beat now. Now we're talking about life-sustaining drugs. And I think we have to look at how do people get onto these life-sustaining drugs. Not necessarily through a needle exchange program. It's very difficult to get these people onto these drugs, and treatment programs are the proper vehicle, because once you get on the drugs, you must continue them every day, or you will have a real problem in terms of your system.
Dave, let me ask you this. Why is it that you're wrestling with this? I'm not suggesting it's a simple problem, but you're a person who's deeply immersed in treatment in inner cities. Why does it seem as though you're unable to decide?
Because clearly, David is concerned about the spread of drugs. That's why.
Well, clearly no.
Let me ask David, before the senator and the father answer. David, you tell us why you're wrestling with it and unable to decide.
I don't know if there are clear-cut evidence that needle exchange works or really doesn't work.
My point exactly.
I think though it is the point in the inner city. There could be a problem there. A lot of drug dealing, and who's to say whether they're not going to deal needles in that. But the point is that I think really right now we have to put our priorities straight. And I think if we're looking at saving lives, there's a better way than giving needles. The only thing is it's more costly, and that is instead of locking everyone up, we should look at more treatment beds and get people in where they can get on these life-saving drugs.
But even the federal drug czar says that, and it doesn't happen. Let me turn to Senator Lippman, because it sounds like your critics are saying that by advocating this program that you're risking the increase in the use of illegal drugs. Is that true?
No, it has been proved exactly not. That I said in Connecticut there's a 40% decrease in the number of addicts, in the number of cases of AIDS in Connecticut than there were before it was given. Mr. Kerr is right. The treatment is the best prevention, but since we don't have, we have, say, 70 people, 700 or something like that in treatment, and we need 7,000 in treatment. Mr. Ossie is right, the father is right too, when he says that there is a prevalence of drugs in the inner city. Absolutely correct. That's why we need the needle exchange to curb some of that while we're getting the money for treatment. The governor put more money in treatment.
Let me just jump in on here for a moment. Because we received a letter, the Governor's Council on AIDS received a letter from the Newark NAACP telling us, please do not allow needle exchange in our city.
Well, why did the council then favor needle exchange, given the fact that it was appointed under a governor who opposed it?
Because there are a lot of
received letters like
a lot of people on the council are well-meaning people looking for, there's no pun intended, a quick fix. This is a Faustian bargain, and people have become very myopic. Let's stop the spread of disease immediately, except what are the long-term implications? What mixed message does this send to our children? People in Lower Manhattan, 3rd District Lower Manhattan, have just requested that needle exchange be moved out of their neighborhood because of what it's doing to their neighborhood, the undesirable elements coming in, and what the children are seeing, a disrespect for the law and a disrespect for their own bodies.
Let me ask you a question. Why is it that we seem to at least see in the New Brunswick experience that the local law enforcement people, maybe up to and including the prosecutor, are not adamant opponents, but have essentially tolerated, both before and after the recent arrests, a program that really is illegal and which is opposed by the governor, but seem to believe there's some utility to it?
Because they wish to see the decrease in the number of AIDS cases in New Brunswick. It's that simple to answer.
And in effect, the law is being flaunted. And Governor Whitman has been very strong on this point, that the law must be obeyed. And I'm told that that situation in New Brunswick has been of late cleaned up. The governor is extremely strong regarding her obligations for the safety and health of the citizens of our state. This is very dangerous.
If the science is as strong in support of your position, Senator, as you say, why is it so hard for you to even get a bill out of committee? Is it because the Senate's an unscientific body? I mean, what's the...
No, I'm not saying they're unscientific. They have traditions that they wish to observe, and the senators do not wish to. They're politicians. You don't go out and advocate something that half of the community is against and the other half is for. I have no problem if I'm talking to a group outside the city council in Newark, the legislature. I have no problem making people understand how necessary the needle exchange is, to be able to buy needles over the counter with no problem. But once you get to elected officials, then they have, they are inhibited.
They have a constituency who have virtue, who have values, who want to do the right thing for their neighborhoods and for their children.
We're glad to have had you today with us. We had asked whether or not someone from either the administration or from a number of government units involved with health care would come and talk, and essentially they've been unwilling to come and talk about this position. Yeah. That suggests an equivocation not as strong as your moral commitment to the position.
Yeah, I think, could I,
Go ahead.
I could jump in?
Sure.
I think the senator is very strong to be able to say what she believes, and she believes this will save lives. But I think there may be other political issues now before, an election year where this is not a popular deal, and I think that there might be some of that behind the Hyde Project being, trying to be stopped. I just think maybe since it's already going, why not keep it going and study it and see whether it's doing any good or whatever, I just myself, I'm concerned that if we don't do something, more and more addicts will be out on the street, and because our jails are full, our treatment programs are full.
We're winding down. Is it fair to say, Dave Kehr, that your option would be to opt for broader treatment without regard to the question of needle exchange?
Yeah, the first priority, I think Senator and everyone would agree, let's get these people off the streets in treatment, get the people with AIDS the right drugs so they don't die and they don't perpetuate AIDS.
You also said study
I'm with David.
He
I am
also
with
said study
David.
the HIE project. Father, would you study the HIE project, or would you curtail it immediately?
Well, I don't think we have to look at that study. I think we could look at a study much closer to our own area. Take a look at Philadelphia. 6 years they've had needle exchange program. No study has been done on that. Do the study over there.
Okay. Well, Senator Lippman, anything going to change so that within the next 2 to 3 years we'll see your bill come out of the Senate and ultimately be a law in New Jersey?
That would be a real surprise to me.
Okay, so you don't think it's likely. Well, I want to thank you all. There's so much to talk about. We obviously could go on for an hour, but we don't have another hour. In fact, that's it for this edition. But be sure to join us next week, Tuesday night at 7, Sunday morning at 10, when we'll take on still another hot issue, adoption, the right of birth fathers, the right or wrong of transracial adoption. Still another tough issue with no easy answer. It's what we do best here at Due Process, so be here next time. Till then, I'm Raymond Brown.
Alcohol? Okay, you're using this every time, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's important to keep your skin clean.
Yes.
Okay, why don't you take an orange?
Okay, good.
You need some cotton pellets?
Yes, please.
And I'll owe you 16 cents. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 5. Okay, all set?
Yep.
Thank you. See you next week.
Okay.
Major funding for Due Process was made possible by the New Jersey State Bar Foundation, committed to educating the public about the law. Additional funding was provided by Lawyer's Diary and Manual, publishers of print and electronic information for and about the legal community, including the legislative manual.